Alright, number 10, snakes. Within snakes, the venom system has undergone extraordinary changes, including syringe-like hollow fangs evolving on 3 separate occasions. Now, there's far too much coolness to go into now, but there will be a future episode focusing just on the evolution of the snake venom system and multiple episodes on different venomous snakes from across the world. So, check back. But for the purpose of this episode, we're working on trying to determine what is the most dangerously venomous snake out there. The inland taipan is reputed to have the world's most toxic snake venom. But it's a good example of how that sort of ranking doesn't mean much in the real world. This large snake is a specialist for the baking heat of the Channel Country deep in outback Australia. Like the related coastal taipan, it's a specialist on dangerous types of native mammals that would normally be able to severely injure or kill a snake. So taipans have evolved under extraordinary selection pressure to produce large amounts of extremely potent venom in order to overwhelm their prey before it has a chance to retaliate and injure or kill the snake. The estimated human lethal dose of the inland taipan is about 1 milligram of venom, and these snakes are capable of delivering up to 100 milligrams. In contrast, the coastal taipan is a bit less toxic, with the estimated human lethal dose of about 2 milligrams. But these snakes are capable of delivering over 500 milligrams of venom. So while the inland taipan is a bit more toxic, the coastal taipan delivers proportionally more lethal doses per bite because of its proportionally larger venom yield. Also, despite being arguably the world's most toxic snake, there are no confirmed deaths on record for the inland taipan. And this is due to the remoteness of its native range. They live in the middle of nowhere. Most bites have occurred from snakes in captivity, with victims therefore able to rapidly receive proper medical care. In contrast, there is an abundance of deaths on record for the coastal taipan, particularly for the population that lives in Papua New Guinea. However, even if we lump all the taipan deaths up together, these insanely toxic snakes still don't make it very far up the list. In Australia, snake bites are quite rare, and deaths even rarer. About 1 to 2 people die each year. The coastal taipan, however, is much more of an issue in Papua New Guinea, and snakebite in general is more of an issue. But even in Papua New Guinea, the number of deaths from the coastal taipan, or all other snakes lumped together, is still much less than the average impact elsewhere in the world. So the annual impact in PNG is still probably less than 1 or 2 weeks worth of cobra bites in India. And India is a good example of somewhere with a real snakebite problem. And in India, snakebites are overwhelmingly accounted for by the big 4 species: the blue kite, the Russell's viper, the Sawskill viper, and the spectacled cobra. Collectively, these snakes are estimated to be responsible for up to 1 million snake bites a year in India alone. Of these, about 50 to 100,000 result in deaths, but the real socioeconomic impact is in the survivors, with about 400,000 people a year having permanent injury ranging from destroyed kidneys through to amputation. And of those 4 species, the standout is the Sawskill viper. And this is because it's not just abundant in India, but it's abundant across the Mideast and down into Africa. So Sawskill vipers, taking into account their toxicity, the number of bites and deaths, anti-venom issues, which we'll get into a little bit later, all of that added up together, Sawskill vipers as a type are arguably the most dangerously kind of venomous snake, not just in that region, but in the entire world. So despite their relatively small size, their impact is huge. Sawskill vipers were once thought to be a single wide-ranging species, but this group is a collection of several highly similar looking species. And collectively, they're responsible for more snakebite deaths than any other type of snake. This is due to a combination of factors, including a very fast-acting venom that absolutely nukes the blood coagulation, It occurs in high densities in disturbed habitats, such as absolutely thriving in rural farmland. And then it's also biting people who are some of the most impoverished in the world, and therefore the least able to afford treatment. Emphasizing the fact that snakebite is really a condition of poverty, where the people hit the hardest can afford it the least. And perhaps most importantly, even if people are able to reach antivenom and afford it, there's big issues with the antivenoms where the antivenom made against one species or even one region of a species may not react well against another region of that same species or a closely related snake. So this is because that while all the Sawskill Vipers produce the same effect on blood, using the same kind of toxins, acting in the same way, subtle changes on the molecular surface of the toxins impacts how well an antibody molecule that makes up an antivenom is going to recognize it. Much like how flu vaccines made against one strain may perform poorly against a different strain of flu. So this makes treatment hard enough even when the right antivenom is used. But there's a truly tragic situation going on. And that it comes down to the fact that in Africa, there's 2 excellent antivenoms made specifically to treat bites by African Sawskill Vipers. One made by ICP that's very selective for West African Sawskill Vipers, and the other made by the South Africans that is made using a 2-to-1 ratio of East versus West South African Vipers. So while it performs best against East, it still does a great job against West African Sawskill Vipers. So the South African antivenom very much is a Pan-African Sawskill Viper antivenom. However, Indian antivenom manufacturers who make antivenoms that work quite well in India have started selling their antivenoms in Africa as cheaper alternatives. But the problem is that they've been selling it without doing any preclinical testing. And deaths have skyrocketed in the hospitals that have switched over, up to a 20-fold increase. And these clinical observations were reported, but the antivenom manufacturers did nothing. So my lab undertook testing, and the results were quite shocking. There was a total and absolute failure of the Indian antivenoms against African Sawskill Viper venoms, despite working well against Indian ones. However, the Indian antivenoms actually failed against one of the types of Sawskill Vipers found within India itself. So they performed well against one kind of Indian Sawskill Viper, but failed against another. So they performed well with the type that is shared with Pakistan, but failed against a North Indian type of Sawskill, which is unsurprising since the antivenom is made in India using venom that's collected from one geographic source all around the Chennai region. And this is because herpetology icon Ron Whitaker, in collaboration with the Urula snake tribe, collects venom from that region to supply the Indian antivenom manufacturers. So consequently, India has a problem even within India, let alone in Africa. We sent them our results before we published, but they really didn't care. And despite a follow-up study by the Liverpool Tropical Medicine showing congruent results, they're continuing to sell antivenoms in Africa. To sell a life-saving product without doing due diligence preclinical testing to show that it works results in a situation that may be at best negligent. But to continue selling it, despite having seen data showing it doesn't work, is, in my opinion, murder. And it underscores the predatory practices that happen all across the developing world, where, depressingly, this thing with the antivenom is not unique. It's symptomatic of a much more fundamental problem that we will go into in more depth in a future episode on biomedical scandals, so keep an eye on for that. Moving on. Things are not all doom and gloom, however, when it comes to Sawskill Vipers. As with many other venomous animals, a life-saving drug has been developed from this kind of venom, in this particular case to treat heart conditions such as angina. This, of course, just underscores what I've been saying all along, that these animals have value whether or not you care about nature. I love nature, but I am cognizant to the fact that other people aren't. So when I'm lecturing at the university, I often have students ask me, what is the strongest conservation message? And I invariably respond that the weakest message is when somebody talks about how beautiful it is to go wandering through the rainforest or magical to go diving on the barrier reef. Sentiments I, of course, wholeheartedly agree with, but these are emotional arguments. They're only going to appeal to people who feel the same way. You're preaching to the choir. So the only argument that will stop people who don't care about nature from cutting down all the trees and putting up a parking lot is an economic argument, that you need to have conservation through commercialization, to drive home the fact that, in addition to just being generally awesome, nature is incalculably valuable as a source of life-saving medication. For example, if you know of anybody taking high blood pressure medication, odds are they're taking captopril or one of its derivatives. This was developed back in 1976, so 46 years ago, from the venom of the lance-headed pit viper. And it's been one of the top 20 drugs of all time. Captopril is a blockbuster treatment for high blood pressure. And it's been up there with aspirin as far as its medical importance, and it remains today a $10 billion a year market. It's an absolute wonder drug whose importance cannot be overstated. Yet it was developed from a venomous snake, one of the most reviled creatures, where people say the only good snake is a dead snake. Well, actually the only good snake is a live snake, because you can't get life-saving drugs that might save your grandmother's life or make you millions of dollars from a dead snake. So this concludes the top 10 most venomous animal series. We'll be going into venomous animals repeatedly in different episodes, so if there's particular aspects that you would like covered in a future episode, please, by all means, put it in the comments section and I'll make sure to address it in a future episode. I know this was a lengthy episode, but there's just so much coolness to go through, and I could have gone on for hours. So future episodes will dive deeper into each group of venomous animals, such as dangerously venomous snakes from different particular regions of the world. And there certainly are different ways to consider which animals could be named as the most dangerously venomous. And, if you have an animal in your region that's particularly prevalent or feared that you'd like, it covered in an episode, please, put it in the comments section and I'll research it for a video. So thank you very much and stay tuned.